This is what now takes place in the physical. After showing you this chart, now I want to take you to Mount Moriah, and I want to take you to the 10th day of the month of the Aviv. Up on the Temple Mount, you see that on the 10th day of the month of the Aviv, the high priest leaves the Temple Mount, and he leaves it and goes out to the north gate of the city of Jerusalem. And how he gets out from the Temple Mount is that there are Levites that are standing shoulder to shoulder, making a pathway between them, and they are facing each other. And the Levites are standing there with these big palm fronds in their hand, and they have made a pathway for the high priest to be able to go out of the Temple Mount and nearly 3/4 of a mile out to the north gate. And there at the north gate, he leaves behind a large contingency, hundreds of Kohanim, or priests, and they stand there and wait for him as the high priest and his entourage goes out to the sheepfolds of Bethlehem and selects the most perfect example of a Passover lamb for that year, a male lamb of the first year. Now, when he comes back to the city, when he gets back to the north gate that you see there, the Damascus gate as it is now called, that is when the priest will then open up the way for him, and as he enters into that center and begins to go through the gate, that's when the priests begin to cry out, "Hosanna in the highest, blessed is he that comes in the name of the Lord." Now, the reason that all these priests are gathered together shoulder to shoulder with their palm fronds is because there are over 100,000 people who have come from all over the land of Israel and all over that part of Asia back to Jerusalem for the feast. On the way in, they bring in cedar fronds or boughs, palm fronds, and pine boughs, and they bring them into the city. And as they come into the city, then as they get their apartments, and every nook and cranny of the city of Jerusalem is just jam-packed with people, every extra bedroom is filled up, and they take their palm fronds and cedar boughs and put them up against the walls of the places where they're staying, so that the greenery all throughout the city streets of Jerusalem is just abundant at this time. And then they go down to the south wall of the temple, where I showed you that Nehemiah and I were sitting there. We were sitting in the area where all the mikvah, or all the baptismal pools, as you would think of them, but they're the mikvah pools that were in that area, and the people would then purify themselves, as it says in John. They come up to the feast early and mikvah, purify themselves, because at each one of the feasts there is a rehearsal in which they expect this may be the year that the Messiah comes, and they are so excited in getting ready for this day. So it is on the 10th day of the month that they are all in their homes. The high priest has gone out to the sheepfolds of Bethlehem, and when he comes back into the city, the priest began crying out, "Hosanna in the highest, blessed is he that comes in the name of the Lord." Right then, 100,000 people rush out of every corner of Jerusalem. They rush out to that pathway carrying their palm fronds and their cedar boughs, and they all cry out, "Hosanna in the highest, blessed is he that comes in the name of the Lord." However, in the year 4029, things went down just a little bit differently. In fact, the Gospels record how that Yeshua takes his disciples and he goes to Bethany, which is up on really Mount Scopus, Hebrew University area there. Now, Hebrew University wasn't there in 4029, but it is there that they visit and stay with his good friend Lazarus, whom he had just raised from the dead just weeks before. And it is that night that Yeshua is anointed with a pound of spikenard, and he tells his disciples to gather together all of the disciples at the north gate of the city that next morning. When we say all the disciples, that could have been hundreds, not just the 12, but all of the disciples that they could get a hold of that had come up from Galilee, from Nazareth, all around, and tell them to all get at the north gate of the city. Then he tells the two of his disciples to go out and get a donkey, a colt on which no man had ever sat, and to put their tallits on him and get that donkey ready. And then that morning, when the high priest was coming back from the sheepfold of Bethlehem that very morning, as he is approaching the gate from the complete opposite side, from Bethany, Yeshua is riding on the back of this donkey, on the back of this colt, and just as he gets to the gate there, his disciples open up the way as the rest of the priests are looking in the direct opposite direction, watching the high priest come down. When they open up the way, he rides in on the back of this donkey, and his disciples in unison begin crying out, "Hosanna in the highest! Blessed is he that comes in the name of the Lord." Right then, all of these priests, all the way up this line, begin crying out, "Hosanna in the highest! Blessed is he that comes in the name of the Lord." They are carrying out what they've been doing every single year, and there's no reason why they wouldn't do it now, because they heard the cry go out outside of the gate, and now they are cheering it, and those thousands of priests all the way up onto the Temple Mount are crying out, "Hosanna in the highest." Right then, every single room in the city of Jerusalem is evacuated. They grab their palm fronds, they grab their cedar boughs, they rush out to that pathway, and they are waving it. It sounds like a hurricane in the city streets of Jerusalem. 100,000 people crying to the top of their voice, "Hosanna in the highest! Blessed is he that comes in the name of the Lord." Right then, those Kohanim, those priests, turn around and they see Yahshua on the back of this donkey with his disciples who have started the whole thing, and they said, "Tell your disciples to shut up and quit saying this." And he said, "I will not. I will not. If the rocks have to be given a voice, the rocks will cry it out, because this is the day the rehearsal is fulfilled. This is the day you've been rehearsing every single year for 1,000 years. And this is the day that the Passover Lamb, who was born 30 years ago in the sheepfolds of Bethlehem, now makes his triumphal entry into Jerusalem. And if the rocks have to be given a voice, the rocks will cry it out, because this is the day the rehearsal is fulfilled, and the entire city is in uproar, and no one can stop it, because nothing is going to stop the feast of the Lord and the rehearsals that have been put in place for 1,000 years. Nothing is going to stop them from taking place. And as he goes up that pathway, and everyone's crying out, "Hosanna in the highest," and then you can imagine as the priests are watching and they're waiting, and one bends over and looks. It's not a lamb, it's a donkey. There's a donkey coming. "Hosanna in the highest! Hosanna in the highest! Blessed is he that comes." He looks down. It's Jesus. It's Jesus on a donkey. But they don't know what's going on as he goes by, and he's riding on the back of this donkey, and they're crying out, "Hosanna in the highest." And the entire pathway behind him completely fills in with hundreds of disciples and all the people of the city now falling in behind him, and they continue, all the priests ahead continue, "Hosanna in the highest," until he gets all the way up on the Temple Mount. But the whole pathway is completely filled in behind him, and the high priest is standing outside the city wall of Jerusalem with his lamb on a rope. Can't even get into town.